Hi, good morning, everybody. I wanted to. I'm kind of excited about this morning because I brought this passage up yesterday, and it was when Jesus is walking on water, and Peter sees him, and you know, kind of going along with what I had talked about. I think it was earlier in the week about fear. I really wanted to focus on that passage today. We're talking about Matthew 14, and it starts at verse 22. And this was kind of a continuation of what I talked about yesterday, where Jesus needed to kind of remove himself, go to the mountaintop, and have his own sort of quiet time in prayer. But what follows that is, I think, a really valuable lesson in all of our lives about when we are Peters, when we are those that can understand what it means to have faith, can understand the value of having a very strong faith, but at the same time, when that faith is tested or we're challenged by our own self-doubt, then suddenly we start to sink. So I want to read a little bit of it, and then I want to kind of talk about it. Sorry, I'm so jazzed. I totally just got right into this today. But it starts with, so it starts really in verse 25. And I'm just going to read a little bit more than maybe I normally would, because for some of you that may not be so familiar with this piece of scripture, I think this is really important, and it's not super long. Starts on verse 25. It goes, "Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. 'It's a ghost,' they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, 'Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid.' 'Lord, if it is you,' Peter replied, 'tell me to come to you on the water.' 'Come,' he said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, 'Lord, save me.' Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. 'You of little faith,' he said, 'why did you doubt?'" So, what does that mean? Think about how often in our lives, I know for myself, that it is so easy. Maybe something inspires us and we get really just very motivated to pursue a certain path in our lives. And then all of a sudden, it's like we are like Peter in the light of Jesus, in the company of Jesus, in the embrace of Jesus. We are able to walk on water. We are able to do seemingly the impossible. And I think that's what having a very strong, solid faith is. And then suddenly, because we are who we are as human beings, we suddenly start to look at the wind around us. And that wind can be the influence of others. It can be just this self-doubt that we put in ourselves. It could be maybe an obstacle that gets in our way. And suddenly that becomes this wind, and it takes our focus off of Jesus. It makes us focus on everything that we think is coming up against us, and it allows us to sink. And it wasn't until, when Peter asked, Jesus basically, "If it's you, tell me to come towards you. And in that, I will be able to do the impossible." Here they see Jesus walking on water. This clearly is not something that any normal human being can do. And so Peter, in his faith, goes, "Jesus, please tell me, if this is you, tell me to come to you, and I will be able to do what you do. I will be able to walk on water with you." And he does. In that union with Jesus, in his steadfast faith in what what normally would be perceived as this sort of almost insanity, this miraculous encounter, Peter is able to actually meet Jesus on the water. He's able to walk on water with him. He's able to do the impossible. And like I said, that moment that he starts to take his focus, take his attention off of his faith, he puts it on other things. He puts it on everything else that's around him. He suddenly begins to sink. And in that moment of failing, of falling below the waterline, he suddenly then again asks and cries out to Jesus and says, "Please, Lord, save me." And just by the sheer act of asking and the sheer action of Jesus touching him, he's able to be lifted and, goes into the boat again. And, I think for me, that's so important, because I don't know about you guys, but I could have those days where I am so excited about a certain path. Maybe an opportunity comes my way, or maybe I have an idea of something that I want to pursue, and I have all the confidence in the world, and I'm like full steam ahead working in that direction. And then all of a sudden, I allow something else outside of me to take my focus not only off my own courage and enthusiasm, but taking it off of, most importantly, of God. And trusting that if I'm being led in a certain way, that is the way that I'm supposed to be going. That is, my feet are planted where they need to be planted. And much like Peter, that might be they're planted on the water, walking with Jesus. And then all of a sudden, like I said, something gets in our way, and maybe sometimes we look at obstacles, any hindrances or things that come across that path that sort of slow us down, and then all of a sudden we start to let doubt creep in, and we go, oh, maybe this is not what I'm supposed to be doing, or maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe this is a sign that I'm not supposed to do it. Well, maybe it's a sign that you need to put your focus back on God, because God has led you there to begin with, and he wants to stay with you on that journey. And I think a lot of times once we kind of go into the motion of a direction, we start to lose the touch of God. I think sometimes we start to believe that we are on our own mission, and confidence is wonderful. Confidence is a gift, and something that we should all really try to nurture in ourselves. But at the same time, we need to be humble. And we need to be humble in the fact that we are truly nothing without God. He has given us the gift of life. He has given us the blessings that come our way. Even in the trials, we have blessings in those trials. We have blessings in the challenges that we face, and how they build us, how they shape our character, how they make us closer sometimes in our faith. That is hopefully the idea. All of that comes from God. And when we start to lose our focus on that, it just seems to me that all of a sudden we are now left sinking, and we are overwhelmed by everything that's happening around us, and we end up not being able to quite move the same way. We're not able to walk on water like we would if we were in the company of Jesus. And I think when I was reading that yesterday, and kind of, again, this is a continuation of the power of prayer and how much we need that on a day-to-day basis to keep us kind of focused on God. I think it's even more important when we're on a journey, when we're on this sort of quest, because whatever those desires are that God puts into your heart, I encourage you, listen to those. Even if they seem improbable and impossible, listen to those desires, because there's probably something really significant and meaningful about them. And if you are in that pursuit, if you do come across any kind of doubt or naysayers, or the storms, the winds of these storms that we sort of bring into our lives, sometimes we create ourselves. Sometimes we can be very self-sabotaging in a lot of ways. I've definitely have experienced that when there's sort of things that I probably should be doing or need to be doing. It's a calling that I need to be doing. I somehow make up a lot of excuses of why I shouldn't do that. And I don't know about you, but what I end up finding is that sometimes I listen to that voice more than I listen to his voice above. And my voice it means nothing. That little voice of doubt it's powerless when I bring my attention back onto God, back into my faith, and I really pray for God's guidance along the journey. And even if I'm come up against maybe some walls, some obstacles, it's sort of like, how God lead me in the direction of how do I work around this? How do I scale this wall? Or in Peter's case, how do I do the impossible by walking on water? And I do that when I am in complete and perfect union with my faith, when I'm only focused on that more than anything. It's sort of like the the body will go where the eyes lead us. And if our eyes are led towards God, it will constantly move in that direction with him. So if you have a chance today, I definitely would say take a look at Matthew chapter 14. And the section kind of begins at verse 22, but really the story of sort of Peter himself begins at about verse 25. And it's not very long. I would definitely say look to that, because I think, again, it's so easy for us to get lost. We get lost and we don't get to experience the miracle when we're lost on our own path, when we are not focused on God. We don't allow ourselves to really fully feel the miracle. We don't allow ourselves to experience that miracle and the miracles that God can and does provide for us. And I want us to learn from Peter. I want us to learn from what happens when we allow doubt to come into our minds, that it suddenly will remove us from that miracle that God wants to bring to us. So I think a lot of us go through this, and I don't know if I'm alone in this. I'm probably not, but I would say, as we end this year, we start to look towards the next year. We start to kind of come up with our New Year's resolutions. And, if there's something that is calling to you, if there's a direction that you feel very inclined, that you're kind of feeling pulled to go, look to that. And sometimes that may not even be necessarily just career driven. That might be something in your personal life. If you're being drawn to focus more back on family, maybe more than career, do that. I mean, I think there's no right or wrong journey. We each have our own. So if there's something that's calling to you, and as you're sort of thinking about what this year meant for you and what you hope 2019 is going to mean to you, look to Matthew chapter 14 and look toward the lesson that we can learn from Peter, because I do think there's something really rich and valuable in that. And I want us all to experience being able to share joy in God's miracles. And if he's leading you in a certain way, listen to that. Focus on him. And at any given point along that path, if you're starting to find yourself sinking, call out to him, much like Peter, and stay focused on him. Because again, where the eyes lead us, that's where we will go. And I think all of us need to be reminded, I know I do, to keep my eyes always focused on God and to trust his path for my life, and see where he leads me, and versus where I want to lead myself. So it is Friday. I hope you have a great end of your week and are looking forward to the weekend ahead. And I will talk to you guys very shortly, but thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.